Well, welcome everybody to this episode of Husbandry, taking an institution so black and white and living it in color. I am joined by one of my favorite people in many different places of life, Arthur Mitchell. I affectionately refer to you as Brother Art. That's how I've known you all my life. And we had a chance to talk a little bit um, about why I started this podcast. I don't know if it's going to be a limited series or one that goes on, but the need for advice for young men, older men, all men who are in marriage and learning from those who have gone before us. So before we get into it, let me ask you this, Brother Art, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, exceedingly well. Glad to be here. Glad to be part of this.
That's good stuff, man. It's my privilege and my honor. Thank you for joining me. So let's hop right into it. Let's begin to talk about marriage. So won't you tell us, how long have you been married?
I've been married 30 years and 17 days.
30 years and 17 days. So you just celebrated an anniversary.
Just celebrated an anniversary. Yep.
All right, man. Well, congratulations. 30 years. 30 years.
And 17 days. Don't forget the 17 days.
17 days. Listen, don't forget your 17 days. Give you your 17 days, right?
That's right.
If you could sum up the 30 years in 17 days in one sentence, if you can describe your marriage, if you could paint it with a little bit of color, what would be your one sentence to sum up your marriage for 30 years and 17 days?
This is a ride that I would get on again and again.
Why is it a ride that you would get on again and again? What was so special about it, so beneficial about it, that you would say, man, I'm hopping off and I'm hopping back on? Matter of fact, I'm never hopping off. I'm staying on this ride and repeating it over and over again.
Yeah. You know, he who finds a wife finds a good thing, favor of the Lord, all those biblical cliches or scriptures which become cliche. But
yeah,
I think that, for me, when my wife and I, when we met, when we finally got together after a few years after we met, that this was a no-brainer, and I know I got the better end of the deal. And once you find a good deal, you want to keep that, because you're never going to get that again.
That's right.
That's pretty. It's like, look, with all the warts and scars and everything else, she's still here. She still loves me. I ain't going nowhere, because I'm not ever going to find someone like this again.
So when you met your wife 30 some odd years ago, what was it about her that made you know that she was a woman that you wanted to pursue? And the reason why I asked that, when I'm talking to men, young men, even men who are a little older, who are still single, they have this problem of knowing what they want and knowing how to choose. What made you say her right there?
The story has two arcs. It was the first pursuit, which was definitely an ungodly pursuit, and she rejected me wholeheartedly and rightfully so. And then it was more of a mutual pursuit, right? In that second arc. And I mean, literally, it was what God was doing both of our lives at that time. And it was, yeah, this does sound really cliche, and it sounds like something from the Hallmark Channel, but God brought us together at a point in our lives when we were both ready. And
Right.
that readiness was a spiritual readiness, not a financial and maybe not even an emotional readiness, but we were both submitted to Him and His will at that time. And that was something that we were seeking together. And we were kind of able to grow together in that space, just leaving college, and looking at that next step of life. And, when God placed her back into that space for me as a potential mate, it was not just check boxes. It was, here's the guide that I'd given you, and she's, every chapter.
Yeah.
And so, in what you're looking for, here you go. Don't screw this up.
Right. So you get into this place right after college where God has lined everything up. Everything seems so right. Back then it was not, it was normal for people to get married at such a young age. But now we see people pushing it back more and more. What do you advise for an individual? Do you think that individuals should get married young? Do you think they should get married older? What would be your thought towards that?
Yeah, I do see that you know the age has been pushed up some. We've normalized cohabitation and all the trial parts of pretending like you're married before you actually set up the marriage, or you get together and start investing in lives like you're married, and then push off the actual marriage, which has always been interesting to me. That you want
Right.
to go ahead and buy a house together, do all these things, like, yeah, but then we're going to go ahead and get married. It's like, so you put the cart before the horse for some strange reason. And I think it's just ultimately that you're just not submitting to what God wants. So if God has said that and put this person in your life, there comes a point when you just say, okay, we're going to go ahead and make this permanent and do it the way God wants us to do it. So I believe that we in society get in the way of what God's will is, and we put the expectations of career and other things, and needing to make myself right, needing to build some things instead of how God wants us to build together. My friends who got married early, I mean, we all got married with nothing. I mean,
Yeah,
there was nothing,
that's
and
right.
but we were comfortable with that because we knew that from that nothing that we came in kind of together with, that that was kind of the foundation for what we were going to build together, and where God was going to take us, and not take me and then take you, that we're doing these isolated things that will hopefully come together, but in the right time we came together in order to build what was ultimately going to be the union that God wants.
Yeah, that's one of the trends that I've been seeing is when people are thinking about marriage or walking towards marriage, one of the areas of life that they're always concerned about, that takes the priority, not always, but some people are really concerned about, is their stuff, right? I want to make sure that this person is right for me to share my stuff with,
Yep.
to share my house with, to share my degrees with, to share my money with. But I think my wife and I were the same way. We got married young. I was 2 years off my target. I wanted to be married by the time I was 25. I didn't get married until I was 27. But I think one of the best things that could have happened for us is that we started with nothing.
Yep.
And in starting with nothing, you knew that that person loved you for you
Hmm.
and was willing to take this ride wherever this ride was going, till death do us part, for better or worse, sickness or health, because they made a commitment to you at a point where you both were on the ground level, you know?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm laughing, because I know we've um, individually talked to a lot of young men and young women, right? And these younger folks look at someone my age and my peer group, and they look at the marriage and say, well, man, you have all this and you have these things together. And you got this part of your life together, that part of your life together. It was like, yeah, but that wasn't the case then, right? And
Exactly.
so if you're looking at me now and saying, well, I can't do this marriage because I don't have what he has, or I'm not him. I wasn't me. I was a different
Exactly.
me. and
That's right.
and that me that I
Yeah.
was the me that she committed to and has committed to loving at that point. And same way that for the women, if they're looking at this middle-aged guy, and then I'm your measuring stick, well, remember, I had to grow at some point.
Right.
And so if
Right.
you're looking at me in process, instead of starting where I was at the beginning, you'll see that there was a whole lot of investment she had to make in me and in us in order to get us to where we are now. So it wasn't that she jumped into this nice polished guy. I was a nice guy,
Right, right.
not very polished.
What? So let's talk about that, because I remember my wife and I, when we were getting ready to get married, we had left a event with singles, some who were couples, and that's the mode that people were in. We were looking at a couple that was married for 20 something years. Man, I want to be like that. I want that. I want that. And my wife and I were like, it took 20 years to get there. So let's talk about that. A lot of the times we fall in love with the current picture of the chapter that an individual was in, but we don't know the backstory. So let's talk about your backstory between you and your wife, Sister Dion, for a while. Marriage is filled with seasons.
Yep.
You're in and you're out of seasons. Give me your most challenging season and your most exciting season of marriage.
Okay, the answer is yes. You know, so when I think of seasons, and I'll put it into the you know, just the like chronological annual seasons.
Right.
I would say that right now, oh, I mean, you know, and the audience will know now that so we have a bunch of kids, you know, so we have this span of age ranges for our children.
Tell us how many is a bunch. Give us the actual
so we have
number.
6, and
okay.
So I have a cluster. We have a cluster of 5, and then there's one off at the end, right? And so the cluster is 26 down to 18, and then we have a 10-year-old.
So wait a minute. You said that so casually. Say the ages again.
26 down to 18. That's our first 5, and then a 10-year-old. All boys, all young men. So we are still in our summer. We may be in late summer, but we're definitely still in that summer. We've done a lot of planting, and you know, so prepping ground and planting all these other things. We have an early harvest that we are reaping with young men, but we still have, you know, that late season kale that Jackson is. It's going to, you know, kind of dovetail into the autumn of our lives a bit, right? And so from that standpoint, this portion of our journey is extended, but it's a great portion of our journey where we get to see things in process and do some do-overs. And at this point, it's interesting because when you ask about marriage, my mind flips to family, because the two are so linked together that it is difficult to talk about one without the other. But I do have to talk about one without the other, because as we're moving from this summer into this fall season, you know, I think we probably are in one of the most challenging times, and that's redefining who we are. So redefining ourselves as a family. You know, we are no longer technically a large family. We have one child at home, and we're going to have that one child for several years. And so trying to think about and maneuver with the changes that come with only one child to focus on. You know, we were a homeschool family, but my wife is working now, and all those second half of life changes that are occurring. So we're redefining family. So there's some loss there as well as gain, right? So you know, so we have more disposable income. Hey, the 3 of us can go to dinner when the 8 of us couldn't. Right. It's little things like that. Like, okay,
it's little things. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
then at the same time, along with that comes, who are we as a married couple now? Because with the reality of this is the last one, and when he is gone, then it's us. And now we have to deal with who we are now in this portion of life, and how we rediscover one another, rediscover ourselves together. And that's a little scary, because it's like, you know, we have been defined for so long by the family, and we have to redefine ourselves as a marriage.
So 2 questions, and one is a very personal question for where I am in my marriage right now. And then the other one is a question about parenthood and being a husband. You are still raising, but you've raised 5 children and they're out of your house, right? They're at college, they're working, some of them are in their careers already, some are finding their careers. How did you stop parenthood from taking over your marriage? Like, how did you remain? Because when we talk about marriage, when I learned about marriage, it was God, husband, parent, and then everything else. But sometimes when kids are such a large responsibility, you feel like the roles can be getting mixed in or they can be getting switched around. What did you and your wife do to put boundaries around husband and wife always coming first, parent coming second? Or were there some times where you're just like, wait a minute, everything is just mixing together?
Yeah, I don't think it has been a perfect, or even close to perfect, example. And our lives were a little bit different because we were a homeschool family. So there were already some lines that were blurred. So
Right.
for my wife having to have some markers in her day, like because she's always mom teacher all the time, and so being able to move and say, okay, now I'm going to be wife and I'm going to be Dion. It was, that was difficult as well.
Right.
I think one of the things, and I would always joke around about what our book title, what our book, would look like, and what the book jacket would be. And one of the things was having all those children. At a certain point, we had to go from, we were playing 2-on-1 to playing man defense to playing zone, right?
Yeah.
Because once we're outnumbered, then we have to figure out, so it's us against them, and they're not going to win. And
Right.
that
Right.
was part of the orientation. Like, yeah, when we have these tensions that we recognize are tensions around parenting and losing ourselves, we have to address those tensions. And so much of that is tied into background expectations. I mean, I come from a big family. She comes from a small family. We were raised very, very differently, even though we came from very similar middle-class families, types of middle-class families, but all of our background expectations come up and show up in how we parent and how we navigate through those things. So when we recognize those, we had to, fight through that and try to move from fighting each other to fighting the problem.
So help me with this. This is one of the reasons why I believe this podcast will be so special, because we can work through questions that I am getting like the one I'm getting ready to ask you now. My wife and I were talking the other day. We went from one child to 2 children. And there's an 8-year break. And with one child, it was like she just fit in and tagged along wherever we went. Right. That's our child, but she's rolling with the crew. Once you have 2 children, it seemed like our life took a change to now our life is centered around children. So I told my wife the other day, I was just like, man, we just don't get the time we once had before. I feel like we just work together, right? It's get up in the morning, it's get the kids together, get them to school, go to work, come home, dinner, homework, get them ready for bed. By the time we finish that, we are tired, go to bed. All right, coworkers, see you at work tomorrow. What advice would you give to a married couple who is in that season of raising children, and marriage at some point is starting to feel more like a work relationship, not because we're falling out of love or we don't have the intimacy, but time is really limited and we are not getting the time we once had to double down on how much I love you, how much I want to spend time with you? What advice would you give?
Recognize that is the reality and deal with it as a reality. So if you just lament the loss of it without doing something about it, then you just get stuck in this downward spiral of activity and regret, because well, oh man, we used to do this, we can't do that, we can't do this, we can't. So you get stuck in that can't cycle that makes you just bitter. So recognizing where you are, and then once you recognize, say, okay, what are we going to do about it? So how do we redeem the time that we do have? How do we plan for time that we want to have, and be very intentional about it? We've been up and down about this. There were some periods of time when we did good, some periods of time when we were lousy about it. But it is, how do you protect the time that you want to protect? And
Yeah.
so do you, do you have the conversations you need to have? Do you set aside just time to listen? And if I know I'm busy and she's talking and she wants to continue talking, I have to put my busyness aside in order for just to allow her to share what she wants to share at that point in time, without her having to feel that she's rushed off of my agenda.
Right.
That she is still my agenda. She is still, that person who I want to ensure is, loved and cared for, and she feels valued and validated and important. And that's one of my primary jobs. The whole notion of loving my wife, I have to figure out all the time what that looks like. And as life changes and seasons change, it may become nuanced, but whatever the clues were you got early on, those are probably the same clues and cues that tell you, hey, here's what I need from you as the lead lover of my life, and the lover of my heart, mind, and soul, right? So yeah, once you recognize, if you recognize it and you don't do anything about it, then it's like, shame on you, because you knew there was an issue.
Yeah, that's great advice. In my stages of manhood, being married at 27, I realized that I went from a young adult to a young man to close to a middle-aged man. And when I think about what's mine, right? My time. Or when I hear us guys having man caves, which is, there's nothing wrong with having the man cave, but there's a balance now, because you just talked about it. You need to make room to be the lead lover for your wife. So if she needs time, you need to put your busyness down. You need to put sometimes even your personal time down. How have you and your wife found personal time to be Art Mitchell and Dion Mitchell outside of your marriage and your parenthood? How have you carved that time out?
Like I said, we have not done a great job with this all the time. But there are times when, uh, so recently, I had an opportunity to become part of a group, and I was struggling with it because it would be just a once a month commitment, and getting out and doing something once a month. But my struggle at that point was, I was not meeting my commitment to spend enough quality time with my wife in order for me to feel comfortable doing this once a month commitment that she said, I think you should do. I want you to do that. But for me, I was like, I'm not doing what I need to with us in a way that I feel comfortable taking more time away just for me. That was God convicting me. That was the Holy Spirit saying, you have to get your house right before you can do these things, because you can go ahead and find yourself, your enjoyment, and all these things apart from your wife, and that's not going to do anything to build that oneness that you're supposed to have and maintain. So for me, that it was okay, I need to do something different and ensure that I am here, I am present. We are trying to move forward and grow right now without me taking on this additional thing that's going to erode more time.
This is why I believe we need older men and women, especially speaking to a younger generation. One of the things, two areas of life that are seriously conflicting right now for people are entertainment and intimacy. They're in a war with one another. We are in a culture, socially, technology-wise, where we consistently want to be entertained. We're consistently scrolling. We're consistently tapping. We're consistently listening and watching. We don't really know the benefit of silence anymore. The world is always moving.
No
and we don't
meditation.
understand. No meditation, right? I think it's very shocking for us as young men to hear, hey, bro, you're not going to be able to do that fantasy football league over there because you haven't spent the right amount of time with your wife. You need to put the phone down. You know, one of the things that I've been fighting against with a lot of guys in a good way, you need to put the video game down. Matter of fact, as older men, do we even need to be playing the video game? All right. You know, is this extended adolescence kind of thing? You need to put that down.
Wait,
But
this isn't a Big Bang Theory.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to put all that down. So give me, in talking about that, give me a liturgy or a play-by-play guide on how you believe men should guard their time. Young married men, middle-aged married men. What lens should I see time through? How do I steward it? Who is responsible for it? Who gets the priority? Give me a little play on, listen, this is how you should carve up your time. This person should get this, that. You have 50 things reaching, but these are the 5 solid things that should get it all the time. And then if you have something left over, you can consider 1 or 2 of those. Give me the breakdown.
Yeah. This is always an interesting thing because even in this, there's still some extra time to be guarded in this conversation, right? Because it's very easy to get anything out of balance. So I start off with the Adam model, and that God gave Adam work first. And the reason he gave him work was that, it's like, I want you to understand what it means to be this caretaker. That's what I've called you to be a submitted caretaker.
Yeah.
I could keep all this in order, but I'm giving you this to do. I'm giving you this task. This is where your value is in this space. I've called you, I've created you to do this. And then I created a partner with you to do this, but I created you to do this. And so there is work that we have to do. And that work brings in the income and security and all those other things which are going to be necessary for the other portions of life. But we have to keep that work balanced in that we can't let the work overwhelm our time in our lives. So we have to set work boundaries as much as possible, right? So, I mean, if you have to work 2 jobs because that's what's necessary to do, then you start off with that reality of I have to work 2 jobs. So then everything else we're going to then carve out what the rest of life looks like, knowing that I have to spend that time giving it to someone else in order for us to, live the life that we need to live. And then also we can't romanticize that so. And I know, I fell into this. I know I came from a church culture or a social culture that, once again, looking at older men, I think to a certain degree, like, yeah, we don't want our wives to work, and that type of thing. But there are sacrifices that come along with that as well. So whatever your arrangement is, if she's going to be at home, she's going to be out working, you recognize that work is a reality, and that because that work is reality, then there's definitely going to be some a lot of tensions that come along with that. Time tensions that, so if you're both out working, then, you're also sharing in a lot of the load at home and all these other things. You understand that if she's out working all day and she's home and she comes home and she's tired, that you're not tapping her on the shoulder because she is tired, right? But you want
you
to
stepping on some
intimacy.
You're stepping on some toes.
But that is you recognize that as a primacy of how life has to kind of operate. So within that, now we have that easy time carved out. We have kids, then we know that our days are extended from getting kids up to getting kids home and doing all those normal routine things that you have to do, moving from couple to family, and figuring out what those balance of routines are. And then you have leisure time that you're going to have, but also that within that, what are the things that are going to drive you? So if you're getting up in the morning, if you're a morning devotions person, then you get those morning devotions in. You're fitting it in the middle of the day, you're doing it at night, whatever it is, you're spending that time listening to, hearing from, talking to God, because he's going to give you the direction about your work. about your family, about your marriage, about how you're spending your time. And in the midst of all that he has designed and organized, you're still saying, hey, Lord, how do I do this? What am I doing? And how am I using my time so that I'm not wasting the time that you've given me? I'm not being a bad steward of what you've given me, but I'm submitting to you around what it is that I do with this 24 hours that I have. And then building in that leisure time that, if it's just sitting on the couch and talking, if it's just sitting on the couch together, being exhausted, and you're just being together, right? And it's like,
That means
let's
something.
just sit here,
Yeah.
put your head on my shoulder, and fall asleep in front of the television. As long as we're
Yeah,
doing
that
it together.
means something. That time means something.
Yeah.
You hit on something that is very important. I have never seen a time where so many men are comfortable with being taken care of by women in this generation. They don't care that they are, whether they're cohabitating, that they're living in their girl's house. They don't care that she's at work while they're home. And my wife and I talk about it even when, yeah, in the street. Yeah. My wife and I talk about it a lot, that even when we look at the relationship with our young women and our young men and how they matriculate and go through college, that the women are succeeding at a pace that is far
exceeding.
I mean, I'm sorry.
It's far exceeding.
Yes, the pace of men, and it comes down to this theme of work ethic. What relationship or should I have if I'm a young man and I'm thinking about getting married, or I'm a young man that's already in a marriage? What does my work ethic and my drive and me actually accomplishing and completing goals have to do with the quality of my marriage, or the quality of mate that I will make in the marriage?
So once again, going back to Genesis,
yeah,
God gave man work, and then he put
you brought it up. You brought it up with the work. That's right.
But then he put toil into the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the work was what I was called to do in the garden before the fall. After the fall, I still had work to do. Now it's about to sweat on my brow.
Yeah.
Right? So now there's some stick-to-itiveness and some work ethic, and that has to come into this. That it's not going to be easy, and yeah, unfortunately, we're at a day and age where hard work and hard work that may be defined by so whatever we're calling hard work, that is something that not a lot of people, or not enough people, have experienced in a way that they really understand what it means to work hard and stick with it in order to produce something. And
yes,
whatever we're producing is income, even if it's meager income, whatever it is, that there is value in that. There is value in every type of work, and every type of work is not going to have the same return. And if you want work with a greater return, then there's work put in to get work with a greater return. And it's that type of rule of multiplication that we just don't see practice as an overall ethic. And a lot of that is transmitted in family. It has to be transmitted in culture. It has to be transmitted. I saw this person doing that. I have watched them build. And therefore, because I saw that and I watched them build, then I know that that's the pathway I have to follow. One of the, all right, so coming from a very middle class family, I am third generation college going, large family on both sides. I have watched men and women work hard for a long time. All the stories of my family's hard work are part of my background and part of my story. So that was normalized for me, right?
Yeah.
And because it was normalized, because my father, when there was a task to do, whatever age I was, I'm going to show you what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. Now you go do it. And that was the expectation. I think back to the child abuse. I mean, not child abuse, but to the lessons I learned. There were difficult lessons, right? But high expectations of, you can do this. I trust you to do it. I've shown you how to do it. You're not, you don't have any type of disability that would prevent you from doing this. So I expect you to do this hard thing. There
Yeah,
was a book that was written several years ago that we used to have young people go through called Do Hard Things.
that's
We have
right.
gotten people out of doing hard things. We want things to be easy because we are so used to things being so automated for us and so easily accessed that even how we access information is an easy thing when it used to be. I mean, you're too young to remember
Had to go
spending
to the
your time in
library, pull out the card, flip
all
it,
that stuff,
go,
right?
all that.
Microfiche.
That's right.
There was no getting anything off the computer. I'd have to go to the microfilm, find a newspaper article, looking at this screen, download that article, and then everything I'd have to do. So even accessing information was a process where we had to learn how to do things that weren't necessarily easy in order to get a product at the end, which probably didn't have a great return, but it had value.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I'm getting excited in here because there is, I believe, a direct correlation.
And I'm sorry, I just want to, so that transmission of that,
Right.
that was a direct transmission from my father, my mother to me, right? And with my sons, my sons have lived a fairly privileged life, and my message to them has always been that you do not waste what God has given you. That right now you don't have, as a teenager, you don't have to go out and get a job at Chick-fil-A or something unless you want to, and you just want that extra money because you want to do stuff with the money.
Right.
Outside of that, your job is to be a student and to work as unto the Lord, to not squander your gifts, to not squander your talents. And as long as you are doing that, that is the investment that you're making in your future. But I expect you to do that and do that well. I expect you to spend your time doing those things, because what God is going to do is honor that and turn that in. That is your investment for now for a future return. And you learn how to work hard in the space where you're supposed to be working.
That is, I think that's just amazing wisdom. When we look at the world today, there may be, we may be able to make a direct correlation between the failure of marriage and the lack of knowing how to work hard at something, because marriage, in and out of those seasons, it's hard work.
It's hard work,
right? My wife and who she is now, when I married her 11 years ago, 10 years ago, she's not a totally different person, but there is a lot that is different about her.
Right.
There are different things in life that she is fighting. She's in a different area of womanhood, right? And because I understand that the work, you said this, may not be the greatest payoff right now, but it's of great value because of who she is, of loving her and what we're going to become. I'm willing to get up day in and day up and put that work in. But if I am a person that says, man, I'm used to quitting stuff when it gets hard, I just give up when it gets hard.
Or I don't even start because I believe it's hard.
Or I don't start because I believe it's hard. Then I get the results of that.
Yes.
Right. I get the results of not starting. I get the results of giving up. And I believe we see that in marriage a lot. You said earlier you have 6 kids, but I don't think we specified that they were 6 boys. Some of them are young men now. What are you saying as the advisor to your young men about marriage, about picking a mate, about what they need to work on? What have been some of the tips or some of the advice that you've given your sons who are young men now? 4 of them are in marriage age. Am I right? 4 out of the 6?
Well, so three. So we have 2 who are still early in college.
Okay. So 3 of them.
3 college grads.
Right.
And so of that, we have 1 who is almost a year into marriage. We have 1 who is getting married in January. So that's 2. And then the 3rd one, he just graduated from college, and he definitely wants to be married, and he is preparing his heart and mind for that.
How are you helping him prepare his heart and mind? How are you helping the one that is not? How are you helping the one that is preparing to get married? And how are you helping the one that is married? What are you doing?
What am I getting out of the way. No, that transition from, um, in the relationship is really important. That it is more now answering questions and being an advisor than it is a lot of direct, here's what you should do. Right. So
Mhm.
as they come up with challenges, we want to keep the lines of communication open because um, we want them to have other people who are feeding into their lives as well, so that they have. I mean, they're not in my house every day. They live across the country, so they
Yeah.
should have a different circle of men and of people who are feeding into them that they should be able to go to and be trusted advisors for them. And we are part of that circle. We'd love to be first, but it's okay if we're not, because as long as you have someone who is a good, godly, trusted person who you can go to and say, "Hey, this is what I'm dealing with," Um, as a young person, I know that I was fortunate enough to come to a place where there were a lot of godly young men who were in the same space of journey with me, and we journeyed
Mhm.
together, and we held each other
Yeah.
accountable. We were serious about holding each other accountable about spiritual things and about our friendships and our relationships and other things. But the primacy was, who are you as a man of God? And if they have people who are pouring into their lives that way, they're grounded in a good church. Um, we've given them all the other basic lessons, right? But when they have a question, and I do appreciate that they do call. They do say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do about this. Can we
Mhm.
talk?" And
Yeah.
in those spaces, I'm available to listen and ask a lot of questions. And then where I'm asked to give input, to give input. That's difficult because as a parent, I want to solve problems. I want to go directly to solutions. I want to tell you what to do, but here's what you should do based on how I live my life. Well, guess what? He's living his own life and has to figure out how to navigate this thing that he's living in the place where he is in the context of his own life. So I encourage that he has that, that that those peer relationships and the pastoral relationships and the discipleship relationships where they're getting good godly advice in close proximity and in real time. And
Hmm.
so that has been that's been challenging in lots of ways, especially because my wife would definitely want us to be the first call and we're giving the direction,
Right.
which is
Right.
cool, but we are not raising them to only be linked to us in that way. They're part of a larger family of God, and they're going to be pouring into other people's lives in the exact same way. And that's how they build community, and that's how they're building um, themselves as independent adults, which is who they should be.
Man, that's so good. Last question before we end our time together today. If you had a banner to wave, think about you on the side of a highway, or you're flying a banner across the world by Goodyear blimp, and you had one thing to tell people about marriage, or one area to encourage them, or one area to warn them, what's your message on the blimp?
Um, yeah, I'm just thinking all types of all types of things. Um, okay, a good blimp banner would be "Marriage is worth it."
Marriage is worth it. That's the blimp. There
That's
you
the blimp.
go. That's the blimp. It's worth it. Well, Brother Art, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Husbandry, man. Your wisdom, your input, your journey, your story was very impactful for me. And I believe it'll be very impactful for those who get a chance to watch or listen. And we will continue this conversation offline, because you're going to have somebody else calling you, needing you to drill them with some questions to get it right. But we appreciate you. And once again, congratulations on 30 years and 17 days of marriage. And if we get a chance to talk some more about this, we'll see you next time.
All right, I appreciate you having me on, Darren. I appreciate the fact that you thought enough to, have me as one of your guests. Means a lot. And I hope that someone does get something out of this.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you once again. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode of Husbandry.